We are going to go right out of those first two really great presentations into a discussion around education and workforce readiness. Early on, we had Nayaki Nayar give us a presentation on connecting the things to the outcomes. I thought Daryl rocked with a great presentation on the implications of the work of moving from the things to the outcomes, and gave us some good examples of things to think about from a policy perspective. One of the other things that we have to think about is, where are we going to get the people from that will actually analyze that data, turn that analysis into meaningful information that we can then use to deliver better user experience, better connectivity, better outcomes. We've got a distinguished panel of experts today that are going to talk to us and help us understand what the whole spectrum of the community is thinking about with regard to workforce preparation. Are any of you struggling to hire people in technology right now? And you're just snickering at me because everybody's struggling with that, right? I've got a number of friends in the CIO community. Oh, by the way, I'm Walt. Does everybody know who I am? I just assume everybody knows who I am. I'm Walt Carter. I am the Chief Information Officer, Chief Marketing Officer for Primary Capital Mortgage here in Atlanta. We operate nationwide, and we're a wholesale lender. So I get to do a lot of moderating, and I have a lot of fun with it. I hope you guys don't mind me having a little bit of fun with the panel today. Let me introduce who I have here. So from the University of Georgia Board of Regents, we have the CIO, Bobby Loreen. Ladies and gentlemen. From what I call Georgia Tech, we have Margaret Loper. She is a principal research scientist at Georgia Tech. She's got some great insights to tell us. So I've got University of Georgia, Board of Regents, Georgia Tech. In the middle here, I have Vince Brannon, legendary Vince Brannon. From Brannon Partners, CEO. But Vince has been in Atlanta for a number of years, but Vince has also got a doctoral degree in counseling psychology, and he's actually used that in some very innovative ways to deliver IT solutions and staffing out into the marketplace. I have Peter Barth. He's the CEO of the Iron Yard. Iron Yard is doing some really impressive work in 24 cities right now, training people who are mid-career into a new career in IT. And so he's got some really great insights to share with us. And then I have Serena Sachs. Everybody knows Serena too, right? Woman of the Year, technology, CIO of Fulton County Schools. And Serena's got some great stories to tell us about what the lower level schools, K through 12, are doing to help us get the students ready. And so, again, let me frame the problem. We've heard some really big numbers from the first two presenters in terms of the number of devices that we're going to connect. We've heard some really big numbers in terms of the trillions of dollars of economic impact that IoT is going to have. And so we're already experiencing this quote-unquote talent gap in IT. Where are the people going to come from that are going to solve a lot of these data problems for us, solve a lot of the connection problems, solve a lot of the outcome issues, and I think broader than IT, understand the human element, because ultimately all of this technology is driving toward how do we serve human beings better, faster, cheaper. Does that make sense? And so, let me see. Serena, why don't you help me out here and tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing at Fulton County Schools. I'm particularly interested in the advanced classroom environment that you guys are creating. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Good. All right. Thank you. Now, okay, I'm on now. So we're doing a number of things in Fulton County Schools. One of the reasons I came to the district is because it is one of the most innovative school districts in the country. We are rolling out 85,000 mobile devices to the students and teachers. And we didn't make it easy on ourselves. We didn't select the device for the schools. We feel that the schools need to make that decision closest to the students and to their instructional objectives. So we have a marketplace of choice. The schools can select from 4 different devices, and we own the complexity to support 3 different operating systems, 3 different vendors, and 4 devices for those 85,000.
And what do we hope to accomplish with that, with those 85,000 devices? What are we trying to do?
Well, there's a number of benefits to having the technology. First of all, our kids...
That's good for all of us in the room that are technologists, right? Number of benefits. Go
Our
ahead.
kids are born today digital natives, and if you bring them into the classroom and they're told to put their devices away, they're immediately disengaged. So the first thing is that we want our students to absorb the information that's being given to them at the schools. It also gets them comfortable with the technology, and they can take the technology home. It opens up the time of the day for teaching and the walls of the classroom. So the kids can then learn at any place, anytime, anywhere, because they have their devices with them. So that's a benefit. They get comfortable with the technology. And then what I also wanted to mention is that we have a lot of career and technical education, as well as STEM magnet programs and certification paths. So we are attacking the technology gap from all sides, introducing basic technology to all kids, and then also implementing these pathways for sophisticated knowledge, certifications, workforce readiness, and college readiness as well.
Great, thank you so much. And so let's go to Georgia Tech and Margaret. Margaret, once Serena gets the kids out of K through 12, especially from Fulton County, a number of them decide to go be engineers at Georgia Tech, right? What does Georgia Tech think about IoT? What is Georgia Tech doing with these students? And are you finding that there are a large number of students that are coming in with familiarity, those digital natives that Serena just described, who are ready to take to a new level, whether they're in a STEM curriculum or not at Georgia Tech, whether they're going to actually become an engineer or not? Do you find that there's a difference now in the digital native student versus us digital immigrants from a long time ago?
So I'm not on the teaching side of Georgia Tech campus. I'm actually on the research side, and I also represent the chief technologist of the IoT Center that was mentioned earlier this morning, the Center for the Development and Application of IoT Technologies, pronounced SEDATE.
SEDATE.
SEDATE. Yes. So if you want to know more about SEDATE, please grab us at the break. So we do interact a lot with campus, right? We interact with professors and students from all of the different schools and departments. In terms of actual degree programs, Georgia Tech does not offer an academic degree that is specifically says IoT on your diploma.
But others are?
Well, there are definitely in other countries. There are universities that are offering degrees that are specifically IoT. So a question would be, is that really important, right? So do we need the kids that are coming out of high school to enter into a degree program that specifically says IoT? I think from where we've been working with our board members, the SEDATE board members, is that having an actual degree that says IoT is not as important as having the fundamental technical understanding, right? So IoT, as you've already heard, very multidisciplinary. It's not only about computer science, it's about engineering, it's about business, it's about all the different verticals. So having educational programs at Georgia Tech that kind of support all of the different areas of the IoT ecosystem is important.
Daryl said it transcends the physical and the virtual. Yes. I thought that was a powerful statement. Now, Bobby, I know you have quite a bit of background in the commercial space and government space prior to assuming this role recently with the Board of Regents. What's your take on IoT as either a core curriculum element or a degree, and then your own experience from hiring in the past? I know you've hired hundreds and hundreds of people. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on IoT from your current role?
I'd be happy to. My view on IoT is, it started in 1999, and finally we've got to the point where we have the overall processing capabilities, the data analytics, the storage, the capacity as it relates to the cloud. So all the enablers are there. I still think it's key to make sure that we are investing in programs and academic programs that are focused on what I'll term the core engineering sciences, whether it's mathematics, computer science, system analysis, system engineering, software engineering, those types of naturally flow into the support of the Internet of Things. And I think we need to continue to make those investments. And I also think that it's sort of the overall life cycle of the student. It starts at kindergarten, and it extends all the way through the individual being able to make a contribution from an economic development perspective in Georgia. And I think we need to think that way. And the other thing I think the opportunity is that we need to make sure that we're a little more diverse as it relates to supporting the overall future environment, work environment. And I think all of us need to take that on.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to switch gears now. So we've kind of run through education very quickly. And I'm going to go over to Peter Barth from Iron Yard. Now, Peter's an interesting guy to me because he was working in venture capital finance, recognized a few years ago a need that could be met maybe differently from the traditional approach. And so, Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you made that transition from just looking at numbers and figures and into leading this training group that you have at Iron Yard.
Sure. So we really started the Iron Yard, and kind of the first iteration was an accelerator, so kind of venture capital incubating companies, and headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina. That's where we got started. And that was really kind of a community effort to, fund new company creation, really from an economic development standpoint. So we got in kind of with the premise being access to capital being the major hurdle for starting a new business in the state of South Carolina. And so kind of putting together a formalized angel network and a program that kind of facilitated that was the way to overcome that boundary. After I think about 18 months of running that program, I think we had 40 portfolio companies. We were realizing our best companies didn't actually have much of a problem on the capital. I mean, it's always a problem. You could have more capital in the ecosystem. But for the state, or for the city in particular in Greenville, to keep those companies there once they raised that capital, it was the talent piece. That was the thing we were actually missing. So really out of kind of self-preservation, you were looking at our portfolio companies and the hiring needs they had, and where were they going to find these engineers. We'd approached traditional higher ed and kind of, can you focus on kind of hands-on application so they're ready to join a startup? And that really wasn't a great fit and kind of in a traditional program for them. So we said, we're going to have to solve this problem ourselves. So really kind of inside of that vehicle, we had created, really took the same model, the same 12-week mentorship-driven program, and said, can we do it with individuals? And so we piloted that in 2013 with a group of 8 students around front-end engineering, kind of focused on hardcore JavaScript engineering. That worked. They all got hired by portfolio companies. We did it again with 12 students, kind of the same thing. And then we had a couple major employers that are based in Greenville. So GE, BMW, and Michelin, as well as Benefit Focus out of Charleston, came and said, hey, would you run that program for our business? We have that same hiring kind of issue and their productivity when they start. And we said, that's really not what we're in. We're not kind of a professional service provider. This was kind of a more community focused, but why don't you come to the table? We'll review the curriculum, put a program together that services us all, and we would like you engaged in the classroom, because that was one of the unique things about our program was the employers, our portfolio companies, were in the classroom participating with the folks as they learned. That went really well, and we kind of followed the network. So at this point, we're in 24 cities, but it's all focused. So we run 9 different tracks of training. It's all a full-time 12-week program. But those are tailored in every city to the needs of that city and the employers that are willing to engage in kind of that education experience. Mm-hmm. So like in Atlanta, we run 3 programs, front end, back end, and a mobile track. And employers are part of that process. So it is a different kind of educational experience.
So you said earlier that while he's got a spectrum of offerings that you can take young kids into, as well as very senior folks that are looking for something new to do. But the sweet spot seems to be the 25 to 35-year-olds who are already deep enough into their first career to know it's not really the career for them. And so then they take and make I think a sizable investment for that early career person in achieving the kind of certification that Iron Yard provides. Is that an accurate way of describing it?
So almost all of our students fall in that age band, and so they've been in the professional workplace and kind of have a better feel for what they like and don't like and are looking for in a career. And so we help those folks transition. One of the interesting things we actually talked a little bit about this morning with the group, one of our most interesting kind of student demographics would be folks that have been a professional artist or musician and are realizing they, for whatever the stage of life they're in, they want to switch and get into tech. It's kind of the number one kind of feedback from employers on that developer was amazing. I would like to add 10 more of those people on our team because they think differently about the problems and they represent part of the community that our current staff doesn't represent. Okay. So kind of echoing the diversity sentiment, I think we need to get much better on that front.
I had shared with the group earlier today, I'm a musician, entertainer in my sideline, and there are over 1,000 musicians in IT in Atlanta alone. I did an assessment several years ago for a company up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, called Opus. That was the name of the company, Opus. And they had hired 2 of the top operational research scientists from Georgia Tech to build algorithms to optimize the sale of hotel rooms around the world. And the reason that the owner named the company Opus was because he said the best data scientists, the best data geeks that he could find were almost universally part of that pool that Peter's describing, musicians. And there seems to be a direct connection between math and music that's very interesting and compelling. Now, I want to go to the attitude component also, and I know, Vince, you've been working with some folks up in Tennessee that have an interesting gauntlet that they put candidates through for a boot camp. Large numbers of people that apply, but only a handful come out. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks. That's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm a little bit of an unusual business person in that I have a doctorate in counseling psychology, and people say, well, what are you doing in technology? But
you've been very helpful to me over the years, Vince, and I appreciate
right.
it.
But I got into it because I was fascinated with how do you make a good fit. My interest was in career orientation and career guidance. So what makes a career and not just a job for a person, and vice versa. As you're a client, what are you looking for a really good employee? So continually throughout my career, that's one of the things I've been interested in. But what we're seeing now is such a need, such a growing need for people in technology that we've got to do something. That's what we're all here about. We've got to do something to go beyond just our older ways of training and education and expand it. And what Peter's doing is a very interesting idea, and something that is also interesting to me, in that taking people that have maybe finished college or college age and they've moved out and now they want to reinvent themselves in a way. And I want to, what I'm doing, I'm not really enjoying. It's not really my career. It's not really my passion. And I want to get into something that's going to give me a better road and a true career. And so one of the other ways of taking a look at it that I think kind of goes hand in hand with what Peter's doing, the other side of the spectrum, is screening very, very heavily and mainly looking for aptitude, but also motivation. The interest, the desire, I really want to do this. I am dedicated to it. I will sacrifice to get this training. And then the training in this situation is free, but then the obligation is afterwards to work with the companies. And I've found this to be a really interesting idea. I think it kind of goes in hand with what Peter's doing, and it's just one more additive way of taking a look at our performance gap and our technology gap here, our experience gap, and saying we want to close this down a little bit, and we want to bring more people to the workforce, because as we've seen today, it's very exciting to think of all of the jobs that are going to be created by the IoT.
And at the same time, Serena and I on the panel are also on the governor's High Demands Career Initiative. And so we've had a couple of meetings with a number of other CIOs, some of whom may be in the room, a number of other folks from the educational community. and from the Department of Economic Development in the city. And what stands out every time we go through that is the very high demand for computer programmers, for developers, for analysts, business analysts in particular, data analysts more specifically. And so as we look at the demand, and then we look at the 94 million people that are currently out of the workforce but might want to be, one of the other things that was interesting, in I think, Vince, the way you told me the story earlier, was they ran a class similar to Iron Yard for FedEx and American Express. The two large hiring companies in Memphis said, look, we'll invest in this as well. They had a different trainer, but they had 1,300 applicants for a particular boot camp, and they only graduated 12. They graduated 12 out of 1,300. That's less than 1 in 100 that makes it through the gauntlet to get to the actual 8 to 12 week boot camp to learn how to sling some Java or some .NET. But then these graduates go to work at a big company, big shop like FedEx, for instance, and what I'm told is that the guy who's the VP of Applications Development for a very large company said, look, I've got 120 developers that work for me, but my top 4 came from this particular program, and 4 years ago, none of them were in IT. None of them have backgrounds in IT. To me, this is compelling in a lot of ways because it does drive to motivation, right? Not just aptitude for being able to do that job. Because a lot of people, if you can balance a check, you can do algebra. If you can balance a checkbook, you can do algebra. I'm committed to this proposition. I used to teach, algebra for North Dakota State College of Science and Math. And so a lot of people are told they can't do STEM things, right? They're convinced as they go through high school, for instance, that this is not really, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a technologist, I'm not going to be an engineer, I'm not going to be a mathematician, right? And yet, they're balancing their checkbooks, many of them. Not all of them. I'm in the banking business, trust me, they're not doing it. But I can tell you that there's a lot more aptitude out there than we think. And so some of the programs that we're talking about here are really exciting in terms of helping us solve some of the talent gap. A couple of other thoughts though, and this is where I'm getting lost, is I know we've got some great stuff going on in K through 12, but Serena, what is your biggest concern about helping industry get those students who previously have been thinking, I'm not going to be STEM, right? What's the biggest challenge? What really is the problem? Is it I don't have enough teachers?
I think it's twofold. One is making sure that we have the teachers.
Can you guys hear her? I can't hear her.
Sorry. All right. Hello. I can yell.
Okay. Just put the mic close up to your mouth.
All right.
Much better.
Two sides of the challenge. Good. I see you can hear me now. One is there is such a gap in talent in corporations for the same talent that we need to teach our students. So getting more people to come into the schools, even if they're in careers in corporations and maybe part-time teaching, then that's one of the things we talk about on that task force is how do we get non-traditional people to come in and teach the students, teach these programs, and help the kids get educated. The second side of the problem is getting kids interested in STEM careers. So they may like using their phone and their iPads and their technology, but they don't really think of themselves as technology people. Coding doesn't, like as somebody said, getting STEM back to sexy or sexy back to STEM, something like that. Kids are not.
You can do that.
Yeah.
I don't think the rest of you. Well, Margaret could do that. I don't.
Kids are not necessarily enamored with coding. Some are, but not enough. We'd like to see more kids understand that those things that they have. If they're doing this Pokemon Go, everybody's walking around, but.
Yeah, there's a Pikachu in the back corner over there.
I bet. They're all over. And 1 week old, 2 weeks old. So, kids are definitely using the technology, but they don't necessarily see themselves going into the technology field. So it's a two-part problem, and they may be related because the teachers aren't necessarily building the case and making it compelling for the students to take those courses. Certainly we have a lot of them in those. I don't want to say we don't, but I think we could have more.
Well, I hope we can have more. Bobby, is there anything from the University of Georgia system where we could maybe facilitate a migration of senior technologists who are ready to retire into teaching roles, right, where they can feel like they're paying it forward a little bit into the future with all of the richness. You know, a guy like yourself, for instance, doing what you're doing is almost an example of that in some ways, right? Coming out of a nice corporate career into, you know, this kind of educational role. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what the University of Georgia system is thinking about in terms of teacher certification?
Sure. So a couple things that are going on. Number one is actually the curriculum that we teach across the 29 institutions. And have we had a growth in the overall STEM curricula as it relates to that? And we have. Since 2007, we've made an investment, and I would say roughly a third of our degrees are now STEM-related fields, which is great. Mm-hmm. And what you're starting to see is the overall, graduation rates actually improves very, very nicely as we've gone through in 2007 to today. So we continue to build on that. I think as we step back, it's a collaboration not only between the students, academia, as well as industry coming together to look for opportunities in which we can promote synergy. And one of the things that I've seen in other areas is this whole theme of mentoring and tucking somebody underneath your wing, whether it's at the, if it's a 6-year-old, that's fine, but in addition, from an industry perspective of making the change, I think those pathways and reinforcing those are extremely important. And taking the time to actually celebrate successes as it relates to that as well. One of the things that University of Georgia does is that they have the program called Focus, in which STEM students are actually into K through 12 around the Athens area supporting their engagement. And so if it's not only mathematics, but it's robotics, it's computer science, they really get excited about it. And so you can sort of see this sort of life cycle between the young and the more seasoned as it relates to that. My experience is that you always need to reinforce continuing to learn and stay on top of the ball game and look for opportunities. And so the important part is that I think we have to recognize folks for giving back. And specifically, you take the time, you've been very successful, now it's actually time to make a difference from a community perspective. And I think all of us have a role in that, and we need to continue to reinforce that.
All right, Peter? Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things we do at the Iron Yard that's not kind of the core business, not what we're talking about, but so we run kids classes in every city that we're in, and they're completely free. It's just a philanthropic thing we do. And they're open kind of to all ages, but the core demographics kind of 8 to 13. I think one of the most interesting things about working with kids at that age is it's just exposing them to the opportunity. And this is, I think we've done some places are great, some school districts are great, but kind of as a general community, I think we're failing a lot of the kids, especially if they, it's a low income neighborhood, where they just don't have exposure to some of those things. But one of the, I think, great things that we've discovered in that program is it's meeting the kids where the kids are. And so a great example is, so we developed a pretty strong relationship with Mayo Clinic. And so they saw what we were doing in Greenville and asked if we'd help them put a Coder Dojo to class together in Rochester, Minnesota. So we kind of gave them the basics of how we run the class and what it looks like as they put one together. And the head of the Mayo Clinic Ventures called like 6 months later and said, you were running the class exactly like you told us to, but the kids just aren't excited, we don't have great retention. So I said, all right, I'll fly up and see what's going on. And so I just sat in the class, and it was, there's nothing wrong with this, right? There's a guy in a suit in front of the class who was there from Mayo Clinic. Who was older, but there was the kids were all 10-year-olds in the class, right? And they were walking in playing Minecraft, and all of a sudden they were learning how to code around healthcare, for 10-year-olds, and so the first thing we did is there's a guy in the back, it's got a curly Q mustache in a T-shirt, put him in the front of the class and let him talk about video games. And immediately, the content didn't change a ton, but they gave them some freedom to just meet the kids where they were. The great thing about that is, and this is what we've seen in all of our classes, is I don't actually have to teach the kids very much. I just have to show them it's possible. Mm-hmm. And they've got time, and there's a ton of free resources that they can go learn. And I think that's the thing we focus on in those kids classes is we run kind of two, and it varies by city, but one is we use Scratch at MIT's Media Lab, and we show them how to build a video game. It's a very visually rewarding thing, and they can relate to the video games. It's really simple. We just learn one concept of a video game, side-scrolling or health points or those kind of things. And then they can go to town on doing their own thing. And then we run a class around hardware and electronics. So it directly ties into kind of Internet of Things, but they build a video game controller. So we use Arduino, and they learn how to program a circuit board. And again, it's 8 to 13-year-olds. The great thing about that is we'll spend 30 minutes in the week, and they will have spent 50 hours the rest of that week before the next class, and no more than the teacher next week. So I think that's one of the places that you talk about how we get engaged.
Right.
It is, you don't necessarily, I mean, you may be 2 years into the job, but there's an opportunity to give back as long as you meet the kids where they are. I don't know, it's a great place for us to be teachers, all of us to be teachers.
That's a great point, though, because I mean, we've actually trained our whole younger generations for the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years that I've been alive, to be entertainment oriented. They want to be entertained, right? I'd almost like to go into a class like Vince did recently at middle school, and take apart, well, how does the Pikachu come to life in your phone? Right? How do you then grab it and capture it? Why do you need those little balls to go grab that thing? What is the source of your power? Right? And so for those of you that haven't played Pokemon Go, I don't encourage it. Accidents are happening all over the place because people are doing that. But you grab attention in interesting ways with kids in particular. I want to go back to one of the other great frustrations of my life. I ran a training department in the Air Force for a year where I took 18, 19-year-old kids, and at the end of their training period at the base, we would turn them loose as technicians on a live nuclear weapon. Let me say that again. I took 18 and 19-year-old kids who had gone through basic training in the Air Force, they had gone to a follow-on school in their military occupation specialty, nuclear weapons technician, and then we would take them through anywhere from 6 to about 9 months of additional specialty training at the base level. That was what my group did. And at the end of that training, they'd be certified to go work on a live nuclear missile or the distribution equipment for that missile. I am firmly committed to the idea that there's a lot of talent out there that we're not tapping. There's a lot of teacher talent that we're not tapping. There's a lot of high aptitude, high attitude people that are hungry to find a way to get to work and literally start to produce income for themselves. Yes, sir.
All right, so I apologize. I don't know whether we're having questions or not, but I decided to ask them.
I think it's time for a question. What do you guys think?
So, first of all, that nuclear stuff can't be as dangerous as the Pikachu gun.
You're right. We've never had a live nuclear yield in the United States military history. So, but people are crashing into trains trying to get a Pikachu.
I love what you're doing at Ironworks. I got to tell you, I had not heard of it before this conference. I have spoken publicly. I have written on the topic that our current educational system.
I'm going to lean in, Bob. Talk to my microphone so everybody can hear you.
We just met.
Yeah, we're close though. We're close.
We're very close.
All right.
I believe that the current educational system is really got to sort of fade away, and we have to come up with new models. And this follows up on what you had just said about.
You're saying we should kill the sacred cows?
Let it die.
All right.
Okay? We have things like Coursera, Khan Academy, Code Academy, but what we don't have is a way to test those skills. Did I get those skills? Yeah, in Ironworks you have a way. I have an Ironworks degree.
Iron-Yard.
I'm sorry.
Iron-Yard.
Iron-Yard. But
There's a sponsor. We have to take care of them.
Iron-Yard, you're doing wonderful. But what we don't, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
A microphone.
But it's not time for a
That
sermon.
was-
It's time for a question.
Right. So what I want to do is, are you seeing anything that is bringing these this kind of testing and this kind of certification where you can say, okay, I don't know where you got the education from, but you can do these things. Are you seeing it? Do you see an opportunity?
All right. Thank you, Bob. Good question.
As a district, we
Would you
are
like to
looking,
use this one?
Yeah, this one's working now. We're looking more and more at competency-based education and mastery, testing mastery of skills. And we are moving towards that, and we see that more and more in the education space, and we see that organizations that hire our students are looking for that competency and that mastery over and above a grade. At the end of the day, if a student gets a C in math, they really haven't learned everything they need to know for the next level. So we like to look at their competencies, and that's why we are implementing personalized learning with these devices, not just the same old, so that every student learns what they need to learn, when they need to learn it, and how they need to learn it. So I'm totally in agreement that we need to have more mastery and competency-based assessment, and education, and it should be less about the degree than it is more about what can you do.
Well, and you know what's funny about that, because I think it's a great question, Bob. You know, similar to what we used to do with the nuclear technicians, right? We would make sure that they knew how to teach and apply the concept before they could actually get certified to go out and do it. Right? And so one of the other things that we've done, I know in IT, a lot of us now are saying, look, we don't really have time for you to bake a 4-year degree to give me a coder. Let's just do a hackathon and see who can actually sling some good code. We're going to hire whoever comes out of that. Right? And I don't need them to talk to people, so they don't need a liberal arts degree. Right? I'm going to put them in a closet and they're going to just get requirements and start building stuff. And you guys are laughing, but you all do it too. Right? One of the other things, though, and I think, Vince, you were the guy that introduced me to the guys that are applying some of the training tools from Olympic athletes into measuring competency without testing to see if we've got skills, but are we getting better at performing routine tasks? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was an interesting idea. It's actually done through video, and you know, watching the behaviors and watching what they do, and the sequencing of how they're, like in this case would be coding, you know, to see who can show the most aptitude and perform at a higher level. It's interesting to get. It's very, very granular, and it's a different way of looking at aptitude and than just saying, can you answer these questions properly? But I think one of the things that Serena talked about is, you know, we want to have, if we want to get people really interested, and kids in particular, really interested in STEM, get it more holistic, so that it's not just, you know, I've got to be a computer geek, but if I love this, if I love Pokemon, then, you know, how would I make it work? How would I make it better? And almost like forgetting the fact that, oh, I guess I've got to be technical to do that. And we were talking about it this morning. Some of the other areas, maybe people that are interested in music or interested in some of the arts, can bring that idea of thinking outside the box and bring it into what we're talking about, especially here. I know you had something you wanted to say too.
I was just going to add on. Can you hear me? I was just going to add on to the question about MOOCs and Coursera and other types of classes, because Georgia Tech as a university does a lot of work in online degree programs. We have an online computer science degree, but that also applies in the IoT space. So one of the things that we're doing through Sedate, we have an education working group. So basically so thinking about education not from the academic perspective of getting a bachelor's, master's, PhD, but looking at professional education courses. And one of the things that we learned from working with our board members is the fact that many of your organizations are geographically distributed, right? So, and you're not able to actually bring everybody into one location to, you know, to take a class. Georgia Tech does. We are starting a professional education certificate in Internet of Things. So if you're interested, come grab me at the break. I'll tell you more about it. But one of the things that board members, and I would imagine that you're interested in, are what are the classes that are out there where my employees can actually take advantage of education, you know, where they currently are, right? So I need basically a blend, a mix of educational alternatives, things that may be on site at the company, courses that I can send them to at some location, but courses that they can take online, you know, from their office. And so that is something. There's a lot of professional education courses. Some have certificates. I don't know how they're assessed. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but we are creating through Sedate. We are trying to create this catalog to kind of look across all the different types of offerings, things that are very general, that are maybe more cybersecurity or data science, more general in that area, or something that's specific about a particular IoT tool, where we can actually have this catalog. So if you as a organization are looking for different types of educational opportunities for your employees, this catalog will exist, and you can see, you know, what places, what courses exist.
So
Do I
let me
have
ask
to
you,
send them somewhere?
Is
Can
it,
they
are
take
you
it
guys,
online?
do you have interest in that? Would that be something that you would try to take advantage of for your employees? And then the second question I have for the audience is really, does anybody besides Bob have a question? Yes, sir. Hold on a second. Let me get you a microphone. Tim, if you don't. No sermons. No sermons.
The analogy that you can't get to second base with 1 foot still on first? Well, my analogy is you can't score a touchdown with 1 foot on first. The game has changed for education. How is education going to change because of IoT? Not about IoT, but how are we going to change education to create the outcomes using IoT?
Excellent question. Who would like to take that one on? Education, people.
I'll add.
Okay, Bobby's shaking his head. No, I'm out.
I think some of the things that we're, I'll be happy to take it on.
All right,
It's,
Bobby, you got this one. Go ahead.
You know, it's really changing the way we actually teach, and it's focused on, instead of I transmit, you receive, it's more of an interactive environment that we support. We have to look at our learning management systems. We have to look in the environment that's out there that can support this sort of interactive, collaborative environment that we want to establish. There are a whole series of changes that are out there that need to be promulgated, and that's probably one of the first steps. We also have to look at certification programs and how we've talked a little bit about a competency-based education and allowing folks to consume learning as fast or as slow as they need to, depending on their current situation. But we have to provide those environments and allow us to be able to do that. And competency-based component.
Do you see it as a, because I'm gathering from the question, this is a transformational opportunity for education.
It's the application of the Internet of Things and the use cases applied to higher ed.
So the key to it is the formative assessment and the analytics.
Yeah.
So the job of teaching fundamentally does have to shift from lecturing to analyzing the data about the students and what they need to learn. So it's all about the formative assessment, and I don't mean these high stakes assessments that everybody hates at this point, that we don't get the answers back for a year. We need real-time assessment to know what the student needs, and we need the teachers to be able to analyze the data, have dashboards that they can say, Johnny needs to learn this now, Susie needs to learn that, and then have adaptive engines that apply the content so that that student can master that piece of standard at that moment.
Well, I'm going to kind of go to, I'm going to echo what the gentleman here said. In my humble but totally accurate opinion, the reality on the ground is that educational processes should support the ability for the student to continuously learn throughout their lives and make those adjustments. It's not about measuring what do you know, it's about how do you learn, and how does each student learn individually at an optimum way for that student, right? So that they can have the most value for their company, their peers, their community.
We call that learner profiles.
Learner profiles.
Yeah, so in addition to just the content or the, how the student has mastered the standards, we look at how they learn and how they learn best, because people learn in different ways. And so it's a combination of what they need to learn and how they will best ingest that material.
All right, and Pete wants to jump in.
Yeah, so I was going to say one of the big opportunities, I think one of the missing pieces in traditional ed today is having all the right stakeholders at the table. So the employers, so this audience being part of the educational process, and part of that also has to do with the time it takes to get curriculum built and approved in traditional ed. But having those stakeholders as part of the conversation and then building curriculum that's adapting to the workforce needs. And so that requires traditional ed being open to having you at the table, but it also requires having you engaged in the conversation and pushing to be part of the conversation. But I think that's really kind of the big opportunity for transformation here, is to match the workforce needs with education, but there's a lot of red tape in the way right now on curriculum development, and just having folks that maybe have alternative education backgrounds that don't have a credential in a classroom teaching. I know we see those pretty often, and my business isn't necessarily the answer to those things, but I think that's the opportunity.
I was hoping it was.
Yeah, that's sorry. We do part of it.
Okay.
We try to do that, but.
All right, great. Well, folks, I would love to take another question, but we're running a little bit on time. So what I'd like to do is just thank my panelists and thank you guys for participating with us this morning. Serena Sachs, Peter Barth, Vince Brannon, Margaret Loper, Bobby Loreen. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.